Hi, I'm Ira Sachs. I'm the director and the screenwriter of a film called Peter Hujar's Day, which is part of Panorama section here at the Berlinale.
I mean, wouldn't you go out of your way to see Joan Crawford?
But she's not one that interests me that much.
If she was around the corner, you would see her.
No, I'm telling you, I'm very blasé about stars.
What about an evening with Joan Crawford?
I think it would be gigantically boring.
You're probably right. I'd still be very curious.
Yeah, I'd rather meet Betty Davis.
Well, the other people that I mean, I just picked Joan Crawford because Vince showed me a book, and on the cover there was a scene from, I think it was King Kong in New York, some movie, where New York floods. And you see these big waves coming down the street, and it was Herald Square with Crawford.
Hi, and welcome to the 39th Teddy Award. My name is Jan-Felix Wuttig, and today I'm here with director Ira Sachs to talk about his film Peter Hujar's Day. Ira, pleased to have you back here with us.
It's great to be here.
Yeah, it's our pleasure.
I'm excited about your questions.
Okay, hard-heading
Yes.
as I said they would be.
Yes.
No.
Yes.
Peter Hujar's Day is an amazing film. It's sort of complicated to explain how the film came to be.
I can do that if you want me to. It's not that complicated for me.
No, you explain it.
So Peter Hujar, a photographer who lived in New York, died in about 87. In 1974, he had a friend named Linda Rosenkrantz, and Linda invited Peter to her house, and she had an idea to write a book about artists' daily life. And so she invited a number of her artist friends over, and she had one question for them, which was, what did you do yesterday? So she recorded this conversation with Peter. They talked for a couple of hours about his day, and then she proceeded not to write the book, to lose the audio, unfortunately. But she had transcribed everything, written it out, and she gave it to a library, the Morgan Library, and 50 years later somebody found this transcript in the Peter Hujar archive and published it as a book. I read the book, which is just a conversation between Linda and Peter, and thought it would be a very interesting project for me and Ben Whishaw, who I was working with at the time, shooting Passages in Paris. I thought we could make something of this. So that's what we did.
Yeah. Do you remember a specific moment or a scene in the book where you thought like, okay, this could be?
I got excited at the beginning. I thought this is the kind of thing I like because it's very microcosmic. It's very like you're there. It's so authentic because it's a transcription of a conversation. So I got interested, but often when you read a book, you wonder how it's going to end. And this book ends in a moment that really moved me. And in that moment, I knew there was a shape of a film.
Yeah, I felt, like I said before, that it's about many things. It's about art and an artist's life. Yeah. It's about time, because I felt that there's recounting time and recounted time in the film, and you kind of position one next to the other. Because
what's the difference between recounted time and recounting time?
Well, Peter is recounting his previous day.
Right.
And then the recounted time would be the way you stage it.
I see.
So, for example, he would tell his story about how he met Allen Ginsberg for photographs. But then you would kind of switch sort of the stage, and they go up to the roof and they talk more about things. So you see sort of time passing, while time also passes in the story that he tells.
Correct. But they don't match.
Exactly, they don't match. What was important to you, or why did you include these switches between different places where they would?
Well, I think that the challenge of the film is that it was very contained and that it took place probably somewhere like this, which wasn't, to me, inherently cinematic. So I needed, in a way, to explode the simplicity and still keep it simple.
Yeah.
And that idea was to consider the course of a day I had made a film called Last Address in 2010, which is a film about a group of New York City artists who died of AIDS. And in that film, I reconstructed a false day. So it begins in the early morning and it ends in the early morning.
Yeah.
You know, and so I had that sense that I could create narrative in time, and also it allowed me to keep things moving. Like there's a level of as a viewer, you don't know what's going to be next, where they're going to be, how it's going to impact the feeling of the film. Ultimately, I think the film is also really about photography and the nature of what light and space do to emotion.
Yeah, very much. How did you approach that in the kind of images or the frames that you?
I had this great good fortune, which was that the space we shot the film, which is in a building called Westbeth in the West Village of New York, which is a low-income housing for artists that's been around since 1971. And they gave me this space that we shot the film for 2 or 3 months. So I had access, open access, and I ended up working with 2 stand-ins, 2 models, and really with my cinematographer, we spent days and nights there, and including outside, and we created a bedroom and by the window, and we shot a lot of photographs, and we eventually the film is just those photographs, now shot in cinema.
I felt sort of it gives the film this epic quality, you know, because it also influences kind of the story that Peter or Ben is telling, because the way it is spread over all these images is kind of very cinematic obviously then, and it makes the whole story seem larger than life even. That's how I felt. Anyway.
Well, I think if the film works, it has a bit of a Ulysses quality. If you know, basically it's taking very seriously what happens in a day. And it tries to really elevate that day while still being true to the mundanity and
very much
everyday quality.
I felt kind of reminded of like sort of beat poetry or or beat literature, in the sense that is like the sort of the topic of what is recounted is sort of seems trivial or mundane in some way, but it does have a lot of suspense in a way.
I didn't think of that at all, and Allen Ginsberg is a character in the film, but it didn't occur to me that in a way it's, I mean, in some way, do you know Frank O'Hara? You know, in a way, it's like lunch poem, right?
It's sort of like that.
There is this everyday quality. Peter, on the other hand, I mean, this is a hard word to use, but he's a bit of a genius. I mean, his ability to not because of his photographs have brilliance, but also his ability to recount with such detail the course of 15 hours. Not many people could do that. It's what you sort of think it's effortless, but then when you actually, because Ben had to really memorize 55 pages of dialogue, both of us spent a lot of time. Look, it was like, how could he possibly have noticed that much?
Exactly. Because there's this moment, I think, where he says to Linda or to Rebecca, I'm kind of like,
it's okay.
I didn't think that there would be anything I could tell you, but then I thought about it a little bit more, and I remembered a lot more, and it occurred to me that sort of how much memory plays a role in the recounting of a story. Then. Yes,
and how memory changes things. And I think it's interesting that each time you've mentioned the character, you say Peter or Ben, and you say Linda or Rebecca, because I think that's actually what the film also is trying to do, which is to say you're watching someone play Peter, but you're also watching an actor perform. Right? Like so there's and I think that comes in and out of focus in a certain way. Like you're supposed to believe and then you don't believe. Right?
What was the most if you can name one thing, but what was the most important thing that you and Ben worked on while going through this 55-page sprawling kind of script?
Well, I mean, there was a process. The process included me trying to figure out who, I mean, I'd say 95% of the names in the film, and there's a lot of names that are mentioned, no one would know.
Yeah.
I mean, there's Allen Ginsberg and Susan Sontag, but there's also just the names, like if you and I talked about our lives, you would talk about your friend and your mother and this person, and the names, it's really not important who the people are. But for Ben, it was. He had to have an idea, so we kind of did a kind of heavy research of trying to like make his world real for him. And I think there was this monumental task of memorization, which is, it's the thing that when people say about acting, I think the hardest thing about acting is memorizing your lines. Like it's not, it's sort of like they don't talk about the thing that is actually really, really hard.
Yeah.
And in this case, he was doing it, I don't rehearse, and I chose to not rehearse in this film, which at some point I worried was a mistake, but it worked out for me. But he was basically learning all that text without, there's no run through, there's no like, if it was a monologue, you would have like stage readings and you would have like dress rehearsals and you would practice and practice. But somehow he did that in private, and then I think it kind of mirrors the privacy of what Peter is doing with the photograph.
Yeah.
Right?
Very much
It's
so.
really hard and it's really scary, but nobody knows.
Yeah, it's very true. I had a conversation with an actor earlier today, in which he also said that sort of what he's looking for in the director is sort of that demystification of the process,
Right?
which is sort of what you're doing when you're saying like acting, like that. Maybe the hardest thing about acting is the memorization.
Yes.
Right. Because you have a lot of these acting as an art form, which it is obviously.
Right.
But to kind of to use your memory to make your art and your telling of the story mean something that is actually very hard to do.
Yeah, I mean, I think what I love about the text, and I think it comes through the movie, is that you really begin to think about process in a way that is very physical. It's not. It's like, and he's really talking about the making of a photograph, which means like you go meet the subject and you have a cup of tea and you walk around and you feel uncomfortable and there's a little bit of eroticism between you. And I mean, everything is actually specific instead of general.
Very much. Yeah.
And I think to describe the process of being an artist, which isn't inherently maybe important, like it's not like, but it's, for me, it's what I try to do and it's what I do. So I think to have this entry point into the incredible nuance of the moment of creation.
Yeah.
I mean, I think for some reason I'm thinking of Proust. Like it's Proustian.
Yeah.
Right? It's so attentive.
Yeah, yeah. It really is. It has all these little moments kind of, and they kind of fit together into this.
Yeah, I'm not comparing my movie to Proust. I'm comparing like,
I'm glad we have that on camera.
Yes, just to be clear, I just mean that the text is really dense and specific, and I think specificity is the thing to me that is most attractive and is also the hardest thing to do as a filmmaker.
Yeah.
Like, how specific can you be?
Yeah, very much. I think what also sort of impressed me a lot as a tool of sort of storytelling was the gestures, like the visuals of Ben kind of, smoking a cigarette, lying on the sofa.
Right.
The whole visuals of how the cushions look and how the apartment looks.
Right.
Everything, because you can just see them and sort of say, okay, so this is sort of like a different perspective now, and he's very. The way he smokes the cigarette, he's very thinking about the moment that he's recounting. And all these little small details kind of string you along.
Yes.
You're kind of hanging onto his lips because of that, I think. Yeah.
I think you like Ben.
Well, love to see him again in one of your movies.
Yes. Well, we're trying to make a movie this summer. So hopefully 2 years from now we'll be sitting here or in another place, and we'll be talking.
You heard it here first.
Yes. I think, I mean, you know, it's interesting because you have Ben who has all this material, and then you have Rebecca who manages, though she only has 3 pages of dialogue, to actually balance. She's the other half of the film,
Yeah.
and she's not a minor player. She's a major player,
Yeah.
and I think that's really interesting because she listening becomes really active and really complex,
Yeah.
and you can actually describe almost a narrative of her listening,
Yeah.
even though she says not so much.
Yeah.
What she says is pretty
True.
great.
Yeah.
When she does talk, she has some nice
Yeah.
lines.
I think I unduly ignored Rebecca. Up
Next
to this
time you
point.
should just go. Well, next time I think if you watch the film another time, in a way you could watch it only on Rebecca, and
Yeah.
it would be just as interesting.
Yeah, and I think like in that silence or in that kind of taking herself back and listening.
Yes.
There's this. We still know who she is. It's not like she disappears and we only follow Peter or
Well,
Ben. There he is again.
unlike Peter, Rebecca is. I mean, she's not doing an imitation, but Linda Rosenkrantz, who did the interview and then transcribed it, and it's really her material, still is alive and well and wonderful, and she's 90 years old,
Yeah.
and both Rebecca and I spent a good amount of time with her, and definitely this is not an imitation of Linda, but Linda is really almost, she's like narcissism free,
Yeah.
which is a very unique quality.
Yeah.
Like she's not defacing, but she's a little bit selfless.
Yeah.
And that's an interesting dynamic. So Peter often ignores what Linda says in the film. He just doesn't pay any
That's
attention.
true, yeah.
She'll say
Yeah,
something and
know what to
he
say.
just literally doesn't listen.
Yeah.
But somehow she's never hurt,
Yeah.
which is really,
Yeah.
to me, like, compelling and unique
Yeah.
about her character.
And that comes across really well on the screen. I felt that she's sort of, she does have an agenda. She does have agency.
Yes.
But her agency is to
Yes.
listen. It's not to sort of like, okay, I'm here to do my book, and you better answer some questions or
No.
anything.
You know, I did a bunch of interviews yesterday for the film, and there are people. You're a good interviewer, actually, because you're listening and you're responding to what I'm saying, and I'm responding to what you're saying, and we're like, something is happening here that's alive. But there's many journalists, or at least some journalists, don't listen,
Yeah.
and it's impossible to feel encouraged to talk
Yeah.
if someone doesn't listen. And it's actually, to me, I always understand acting really well when I'm doing an interview, because if the person I'm acting with, which is you,
Yeah.
is not listening to me, then I retreat, right?
Yeah.
I'm not going to give you the same things.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think
exactly.
that's true with film actors and with stage actors. Like
Yeah.
you have to like create another half.
True. Yeah.
And she does that very well.
Yeah.
Both Rebecca and Linda.
That is very true. Yeah. And I think that matters a lot in that sort of listening quality, that you sort of, without that, you would just, I don't know, you would have some sort of,
Well, it's a little bit of a dead space
Yeah.
that occurs.
you would be kind of imprisoned in yourself.
Yes.
Really. You would have no sort of someone to bounce ideas off.
Yes,
or,
yes. Do you have people on my side who don't listen to what you say? Do you ever feel like there's kind of something is closed off?
Like, fortunately, no. I think that's more a quality of interviewers.
Right.
Because they have like a set of questions,
That's
and
right.
they think like, okay, like this is a different setup, but specifically when you have a commercial setup and you think like, okay, I need to ask these types of questions, and then I also, for example, need to ask Ben about black doves, or I need to ask Rebecca
Right.
about the Godzilla movies or whatever.
Right.
Not to knock anyone out there, basically.
yeah.
But if you think about franchise or other films,
Right.
then you have this set of questions, and then I think you're trying to have a conversation, but at the same time, you know what you need to get through in the limited
That makes
time
sense.
that you have.
Yes. Yes.
Whereas I would say on your side of the table, basically, it's not like that you're not, sometimes stressed out or that you have to be somewhere.
Yep.
You don't have a schedule. But I think the idea that you tell somebody something about something that you poured your love or something that interested
Right.
you in, that
Right.
that is maybe a more sort of you're more open to
Yeah.
sort of not act,
Yes, yes.
because you spend all your time with this film, and you just kind of
Right.
why would you act about this? I mean, maybe if this is your 25th interview, then at some point you
Right, you lose authenticity.
Yeah. So.
But I think what's interesting is sort of how you talked initially about the movie being about time, and part of what's, I think, unique about this conversation is that they take their time, right? So it's sort of like seductive because they spend so much time, one, just talking to each other,
Yeah.
two, talking about a particular day, but like it's very open, and there doesn't seem to be any pressure, and yet it's strangely like moving forward. Like it is like there's direction to it.
True. And I think also the way the movie is cut and the way you change scenes supports that, because it's not like he ends on some sort of point and then there's a cut and then there's another scene, but you also let the time kind of flow. You give them that time.
Yes, that's good. We had to work on that. Well, you had to figure out where you could. The text didn't naturally give you end points, so you had to build them in a certain way.
Yeah. I also felt. I mean, we touched on that before. Maybe it was just because I'm also interested in that kind of period, but it felt also to me to be a little bit like a love letter to 1970s artists in New York. Obviously, because much of the conversation is about it. But I felt like part of why I loved the movie was also because it was all about all these artists, and because it really portrayed that kind of feeling of what it was possibly like to be an artist in 1970s New York. And you go out and you take photographs, you meet Allen Ginsberg, you're thinking about William S. Burroughs tomorrow, and then Susan Sontag calls you. It's like.
I think for me, I had maybe I created nostalgia, but I didn't approach it with nostalgia. Because in certain ways, even though the film is also a conversation with a lot of cinema from that period, I mean, 70s and 60s, whether it be experimental work, like Andy Warhol or Shirley Clark or a film called Portrait of Jason, but also like Godard and Fassbinder were really important to me. So but it wasn't as if they lived in the past. Like Godard lives in my present. There's nothing. Fassbinder is now. It's like those films exist. I experience them in the present, and they're present in my mind. So I think I live 4 blocks from where Peter lived. I drive by his house every couple of days. I can see the windows where he lived. I know where that Chinese restaurant was, or that street where he walked down, and it's all part of my present. And I think that meant I wasn't fetishizing it as an object. Right?
No, I felt that as well. Like it wasn't a history piece. It wasn't like okay. So back in the day, Peter Hujar met Linda Rosenkrantz. No. This was a conversation between friends.
Also, there was the present of shooting. So in the beginning of the film, you see a clapper. In the middle of the film, you have intrusions of the moment. And so in a way, I'm interested. I studied Brecht in college, and I think in some ways this idea of drawing attention to the theatrical elements and the production are a way to keep the audience like a little bit nervous. Right? They're not going to be able to relax in something.
Yeah.
There's a possibility I'm gonna like wake them up.
Yeah. Yeah, I think because of, it feels like because of when you show that something that you show them is kind of made, that kind of breaks down the wall a little bit between
Yes.
you as the viewer and what you're being showed.
Yes, you have to think about thinking.
Yeah.
Instead of just entering. And,
Yeah.
and I have to say that I'm trying now to find some sort of way to articulate what that meant to me, which I did not do when I made the film.
Mm-hmm.
Meaning I just did it because it was instinctual and it seemed to make sense to
Yeah.
me. Yeah.
Do you find a new appreciation for the film now that you had the premiere? Or
Do I have a new appreciation?
it's kind
It
of a
was, well, I
tricky
got to see
question.
it at the Zoopalast, which is really something. I mean, I forgot that it's one of the most beautiful screens. There's no screen like that in New York anymore. That size,
Wow.
and that beauty, and the sound is, and that it's kind of, that was very special to me, who likes beauty. I think because I premiered the film at Sundance, which was maybe a month ago, and I have a sense that the film works. Like I feel like it connects. So I don't feel that vulnerable watching the film, which is nice. You know.
Yeah, very much so. Ira, I want to thank you again for taking the time and being here with us. And I want to thank you again for the film because I had a great time with it. And I wish you all the best for the rest of the Berlin Film Festival.
Thank you, Felix.
Thank you. My pleasure.